The frost-kissed earth crunched under Ilara's bare feet as she wandered the edge of the whispering woods, where the ancient pines bowed like mourners under a sky bruised purple by the dying light. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp moss and iron-tanged blood, carried on a wind that whispered secrets through the skeletal branches. Her breath fogged before her, a fragile ghost in the encroaching twilight, and her heart pounded a rhythm of quiet desperation against the chill that seeped into her bones. She was no stranger to solitude. It had been her companion since the raid that left her village a smouldering scar on the hillside, but tonight the woods felt alive with something hungrier than shadows. Ilara's cloak, tattered and woven from the wool of sheep, long since slaughtered, fluttered like a ragged wing as she pushed deeper into the underbrush. Her hands, calloused from years of tending barren fields and mending what little remained of her life, clutched a small bundle of herbs, withered roots and faded leaves gathered from the meadow's edge. Hunger gnawed at her own belly, a familiar ache, but it was not for herself that she ventured here. The villagers' tales spoke of the woods as a cursed realm, home to beasts that walked on two legs under the moon's gaze. But Ilara had long since stopped heeding warnings born of fear. Fear had taken everything from her already. What was left to steal? A low, guttural whine pierced the silence, pulling her from her thoughts like a hook through flesh. It came from a thicket ahead, where the ferns lay trampled and dark with something viscous. She froze, her pulse quickening, the metallic tang sharpening in her nostrils. Cautiously she parted the fronds with trembling fingers, revealing a clearing bathed in the last crimson rays of the sun. There, sprawled amid the crushed undergrowth, lay the wolf. It was massive, even in its broken state, its fur a matted coat of silver and shadow, streaked with crimson that pooled beneath its heaving flank. One golden eye cracked open, locking onto her with a gaze that burned through the dimness, fierce and unyielding, despite the agony etched in every labored breath. Arrows protruded from its side like cruel thorns, fletched with the crude markings of the king's hunters. The beast's chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, each exhale a rattle of defiance against the encroaching death. Ilara's stomach twisted. She had seen wounds like these before, on the bodies of rebels dragged from the forests by the Alpha's enforcers. This was no ordinary wolf. It carried the wild majesty of the old legends, the kind that spoke of kings cloaked in fur and men bound by lunar chains. She should have run. The rational voice in her mind screamed it, echoing the elders' prohibitions against meddling with the wild ones. But as she stared into that eye, seeing not just pain but a profound ancient loneliness mirroring her own, her feet refused to move. Ilara knelt slowly, her knees sinking into the cold mud, and unwrapped her bundle. The herbs spilled into her palm like forgotten promises, fever-few for the fever she imagined raging beneath that pelt, yarrow to staunch the bleeding that threatened to claim it. "Easy now," she murmured, her voice a soft thread in the gathering dusk, though she knew beasts understood little of human tongues. Or so the tales claimed. The wolf's lip curled in a snarl, revealing fangs that gleamed like polished ivory, but it made no move to strike. Its body trembled, muscles rippling under the fur as if warring with some inner tempest. Ilara's hand hovered, then pressed gently against the shaft of an arrow, feeling the heat of fever radiate through her skin. A whimper escaped the creature, raw and heartbreaking, and something in her chest cracked open, a well of empathy she thought long dried up. She had lost her brother to the king's hunt, his body returned in pieces as a warning against harboring the cursed ones. This wolf, dying alone in the filth, was no different, a victim of the same merciless crown that squeezed the life from the borderlands. With a steadying breath, she snapped the arrow's shaft, leaving the barbed head embedded to avoid deeper damage. The wolf's eye widened, a flash of surprise mingling with the pain, but still it did not lash out. Emboldened, Ilara tore a strip from her cloak and packed the wound with yarrow, the bitter scent rising sharp and green. Blood soaked her fingers, warm and sticky, a reminder of life's fragile tether. "You're fighting," she whispered more to herself than to it. "So am I." As she worked, the wood seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled, and the first stars pricked the canopy like distant eyes watching her audacity. Hours blurred in the dimming light, the sky deepening to indigo as Ilara tended the beast. She sang fragments of an old lullaby her mother had hummed, tunes of star-crossed lovers and forests that wept for the fallen, her voice weaving through the rustle of leaves. The wolf's breathing eased fractionally, its massive head resting heavier against the earth, though the golden eye never left her face. In that gaze, Ilara felt seen, not as the orphaned scavenger the village pitied, but as something more, a thread in the tapestry of fate, fragile yet unbroken. As midnight crept in, the moon rising full and merciless, a shiver ran through the wolf's frame. Its fur seemed to ripple unnaturally, shadows dancing along its edges, and Ilara pulled back, heart hammering. Legends whispered of the change, the moon's pull on those touched by the wild blood, but she had dismissed them as superstitions to frighten children. Now doubt clawed at her certainty. The creature's whine deepened into a growl that vibrated through the ground, and for a moment she glimpsed something almost human in its stare, gratitude laced with warning. She stayed through the night, feeding it sips of water from her flask, her own exhaustion a dull throb in her limbs. Dawn approached like a hesitant lover, painting the horizon in hesitant golds. The wolf stirred, its wounds no longer gushing, though weakness still pinned it to the earth. Ilara rose, wiping her bloodied hands on her skirts, a strange peace settling over her. She had given what she could, herbs, her time, a piece of her guarded heart. As she turned to leave, the wolf's eye followed her, intense and unblinking, as if etching her form into eternity. Little did she know, in the hush before the sun crested, that act of mercy had awakened something ancient. The Alpha King, hidden in the beast's form, had found his claim, not through conquest, but through the quiet compassion of a woman who fed death's door with hope. And as the first light kissed the treetops, the woods stirred with the promise of pursuit, of destinies entwined in blood and moonlight. The first rays of dawn sliced through the whispering woods like hesitant blades, gilding the dew-kissed ferns and casting long shadows that clawed at Ilara's retreating form. Her footsteps were soft on the leaf-strewn path, each crunch a reluctant farewell to the clearing where the wolf lay, its massive chest rising in shallower rhythms now. The crisis of blood loss ebbed, but not erased. The air tasted of fresh earth and faint wildflowers, a deceptive serenity that masked the undercurrent of peril she could feel, prickling her skin like unseen eyes. She had lingered too long, her flask empty, her herbs spent, and the village would stir soon, demanding her presence at the communal hearth, where scraps of bread were doled out like alms to the forgotten. Ilara's mind replayed the night's vigil as she emerged from the tree line, the wolf's golden eye haunting her like a brand seared into her thoughts. It had watched her without malice, only that piercing intensity, as if peering into the hollows of her soul, where grief had carved its deepest scars. Her brother's face flickered in her memory, young Thomas, with his crooked smile and dreams of the old freedoms before the Alpha's decree scorched their fields and claimed the able-bodied for his endless wars. "Stay hidden, Ilara," he had whispered before the hunters came, his voice breaking like dry twigs underfoot. Now she was the ghost haunting the ruins, scavenging edges, while the king's shadow loomed over the borderlands, squeezing life from the land like a vice. The village of Eldridge Hollow sprawled before her, a cluster of thatched hovels huddled against the wind-swept hill, their roofs patched with mud and despair. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, carrying the acrid bite of peat fires and overcooked porridge. Ilara slipped through the outer pens, where skeletal goats bleated mournfully, their ribs stark against the paling sky. Her own hut was a lean-to of salvaged timber, its door a threadbare curtain that fluttered like a sigh. Inside, the dimness enveloped her, scented with the musty tang of dried lavender she hung to ward off the chill that never truly left her bones. She collapsed onto her pallet of straw, the rough weave scratching her cheek, and closed her eyes, willing sleep to claim her. But the wolf's whine echoed in her ears, a thread pulling at the frayed edges of her resolve. Rest came in fragments, haunted by dreams of silver fur and lunar glow. She saw herself as a child, racing through sun-dappled glades with Thomas, laughing as they chased fireflies that danced like captive stars. The joy shattered under the raid's thunder. Torches flaring, screams ripping the night, the metallic reek of blood mingling with burning thatch. Thomas's hand slipping from hers, his cry swallowed by the flames. Ilara jolted awake, sweat-slick and gasping, the midday sun slanting through cracks in the walls like accusatory fingers. Her body ached from the night's toil, a deep throb in her shoulders where tension coiled like a serpent. But it was the emptiness in her chest that hurt most. A void where connection had once bloomed, now filled only by the wind's hollow moan. Hunger drove her to the communal hall, a sagging longhouse where the elders portioned out the king's tithe. The air inside was thick with the murmur of subdued voices and the sour ferment of unwashed bodies. Mira, the baker's widow with eyes like chipped flint, eyed Ilara as she accepted her ration, a heel of dense bread and a sliver of salted fish that tasted of the sea's forgotten fury. "Out all night again, girl?" Mira muttered, her voice a rasp honed by years of rationing hope. "Woods'll swallow you whole. Hunters were through at first light, sniffing for strays. Say the Alpha's lost his prize beast. Big silver thing, arrows in its hide." Ilara's pulse stuttered, her fingers tightening around the bread until crumbs flaked like dried blood. She forced a nod, mumbling about foraging for roots, but Mira's gaze lingered, sharp with suspicion. The other villagers avoided her eyes, their faces etched with the weariness of subjugation. The Alpha's claim extended beyond the wilds, his enforcers demanding fealty in grain and flesh. Whispers of rebellion stirred in the shadows, tales of a hidden pack that defied the moon's curse. But fear clamped them silent. Ilara slipped away, the weight of unspoken accusations pressing on her like the humid air before a storm. As afternoon waned and restlessness gnawed at her, drawing her back toward the wood's edge despite the peril. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples, and the wind carried a faint musky scent, wild and alive, threading through the pines like an invitation. She told herself it was folly, that the wolf was likely gone, claimed by the arrows or the night's chill, but her feet carried her onward, the path familiar now, etched with the memory of her vigil. The clearing lay unchanged, ferns whispering secrets as she approached, but the wolf was stirring. It rose unsteadily, legs trembling beneath its bulk, the wounds bound crudely with her cloak's remnants. That golden eye fixed on her again, but now there was a spark of something fiercer. Recognition, perhaps, or the stirrings of a bond forged in mercy. Ilara's breath caught, her hand instinctively reaching out, palm upturned in the universal gesture of peace. The beast limped forward, nostrils flaring to drink in her scent, earth and herbs and the faint salt of tears unshed. It nuzzled her fingers, rough tongue rasping against her skin, warm and trusting in a way that cracked the walls around her heart. In that touch, the world shifted. A low rumble vibrated from the wolf's throat, not a growl but a song, ancient and resonant, echoing through her veins like liquid moonlight. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, flashes of furred shadows racing under starlit skies, a crown of thorns woven from bone, and a figure cloaked in twilight, eyes burning with the same gold. Ilara staggered back, heart thundering as the wolf's form blurred momentarily, muscles rippling with an otherworldly grace. The legends crashed over her, the Alpha's bloodline. Cursed to shift under the celestial pull, kings who ruled as beasts to guard the fractured realms. But this was no mere tale. As the wolf pressed closer, its warmth seeping through her chilled limbs, Ilara felt the pull, a tether snapping into place, invisible yet ironclad. The king's hunters would come, drawn by blood trails and whispers, but in this moment, amid the fading light, she was no longer alone. The Alpha's claim had begun, not with fangs or decree, but with the quiet pulse of shared survival, binding her fate to the wild heart she had saved. Twilight deepened, the woods alive with unseen watchers, and Ilara knew retreat was illusion. The hunt was upon them both, a symphony of shadow and destiny unfolding in the gathering dark. The moon hung low in the velvet sky, a silver sickle slicing through the canopy of the whispering woods, its light pooling like spilled mercury around Ilara and the wolf. The air thrummed with the night's pulse, crickets' chorus fading into a tense hush, leaves rustling like whispered conspiracies. Ilara's skin prickled under the beast's gaze, that golden eye now a beacon in the gloom, reflecting not just the lunar glow, but fragments of her own fractured reflection. A woman teetering on the edge of the known world, her heart a fragile drumbeat against the vast unknown. The wolf, massive, its silver fur dappled with the scars of survival, limped closer, its breath warm gusts against her outstretched hand. The nuzzle turned to a press, its broad head leaning into her palm with a weight that grounded her, as if anchoring a soul adrift. Ilara's fingers sank into the coarse pelt, feeling the fevered heat beneath, the subtle tremor of muscles coiled like springs forged in ancient fires. A scent enveloped her, musk and pine sap, laced with the coppery echo of blood, and it stirred something primal in her core. A warmth uncoiling like roots seeking soil after endless drought. "What are you?" she breathed, her voice a threadbare veil over the fear and wonder warring within. The wolf's rumble answered, low and resonant, vibrating through her bones like the earth's own heartbeat. She sank to her knees in the dew-slick grass, the chill seeping through her skirts, but she barely noticed. The visions returned unbidden, sharper now, not mere flickers, but tapestries unfolding in her mind's eye. She saw throne rooms of twisted thorn and bone, where a figure cloaked in shadows commanded legions of furred warriors under a blood-red eclipse. Chains of moonlight bound him, a curse woven by jealous gods to remind kings of their beastly origins. And in the heart of it all, a woman with eyes like storm-tossed seas, her touch the key to shattering the lunar yoke or dooming the realms to eternal night. Ilara gasped, pulling her hand away, but the wolf whined, a sound laced with urgency, nudging her back into the connection. Her pulse synced with its, a rhythm of shared breath, and she understood, not with words, but with the raw intuition of souls entwined. The woods stirred then, a ripple of unease through the underbrush. Distant shouts pierced the night, harsh voices barking orders, the snap of boots on brittle twigs, the metallic jangle of armor and leashes straining against hounds bred for the hunt. The king's enforcers, relentless as winter gales, scouring the borderlands for their elusive prize. Ilara's blood ran cold, the warmth of the moment fracturing like ice under a hammer. She had heard the tales, the Alpha's hunters, men twisted by loyalty into something feral, their eyes hollow with the madness of unwavering fealty. They dragged back not just beasts, but whispers of rebellion, leaving villages like Eldridge Hollow as husks, stripped of hope and kin. "We have to move," she murmured, rising on unsteady legs, her hand lingering on the wolf's flank. It rose with her, a symphony of muffled growls and shifting weight, its wounds pulling tight against the makeshift bandages. Pain etched lines in its posture, but determination burned brighter, a fire that mirrored the spark igniting in Ilara's chest. She had always been the quiet survivor, weaving through life's thorns without a sound. But now fate's hand gripped her, pulling her into the fray. Grabbing a fallen branch for a makeshift crutch, gnarled oak, rough as old regrets, she guided the wolf deeper into the woods, away from the encroaching clamor. The path twisted through ancient groves where trees stood like silent sentinels, their bark etched with runes that glowed faintly under the moon's caress. Vines snaked across the ground, treacherous and alive, brushing Ilara's ankles with a lover's tease or a traitor's grasp. The wolf leaned into her side, its bulk a shield and a burden, each step a testament to the bond she had unwittingly forged. Sweat beaded on her brow, mixing with the night's damp, and her lungs burned with the effort, but in the wolf's steady presence, fear transmuted to resolve. Flashes of memory assaulted her. Thomas's laughter echoing in sunlit fields, now silenced by the same hunters closing in. This beast, this king in hiding, carried the weight of 1,000 such losses, the curse that turned rulers to monsters, dooming them to isolation under the eternal watch of the stars. A howl shattered the fragile peace. Close now, the hounds baying a chorus of hunger that clawed at the air. Ilara stumbled, her foot catching on a root that twisted like a serpent's spine, and the wolf wheeled, positioning its body between her and the sound. Its hackles rose, fur bristling into a crown of silver spikes, and a growl tore from its throat. Deep, primordial, shaking leaves from the branches above. In that instant, the air thickened with power, the moon's light bending around them like a halo of defiance. Ilara pressed against its side, her hand finding the steady thrum of its heart, and whispered, "Not yet. We fight another way." They veered into a ravine, shadows swallowing them whole. The stone walls slick with moss that glowed faintly phosphorescent, casting their forms in ethereal blue. The pursuit echoed above, curses and the clash of steel. But the ravine's twists muffled the threat, buying stolen moments. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of lore from elders' fireside mutterings. The Alpha's claim was no mere conquest, but a soul binding. Forged in acts of profound mercy, she had fed death's jaws with hope, and now the wild heart answered, stirring dormant power within her, a whisper of strength, like vines awakening in barren soil. As they paused in a cleft of rock, the wolf's eye met hers, and for a heartbeat the beast blurred. Fur receded in her vision, revealing glimpses of a man, tall, scarred, with hair like midnight waves and eyes that held the weight of forgotten thrones. The illusion snapped, leaving only the wolf, panting, but the truth settled in Ilara's bones. He was both, and in saving him, she had invited the storm. Tenderness bloomed amid the terror, a fragile flower in cracked earth, impossible love taking root in the shadow of sacrifice. The hound's cries grew feverish, closing the net, but Ilara straightened, resolve hardening like forged steel. Dawn was hours away, yet its promise lingered in the east, a faint blush against the dark. They pressed on, two souls bound by moonlight and mercy, the hunt a forge tempering their fates into something unbreakable. In the heart of the wild, where solitude met destiny, Ilara felt the first stirrings of rebirth, not as the village's forgotten daughter, but as the claimant's equal, ready to face the Alpha's shadowed crown. The ravine's shadows clung like velvet shrouds, the phosphorescent moss painting Ilara's face in ghostly strokes as she and the wolf pressed deeper into the labyrinth of stone and root. The air down here was thick, laced with the mineral bite of damp earth and the faint decaying sweetness of hidden fungi blooming in crevices. Each breath she drew felt labored, her chest tight with the weight of pursuit echoing above. Muffled shouts fracturing against the rock walls, the hound's frenzied yips slicing through like desperate pleas. The wolf's flank brushed hers, a solid warmth amid the chill that seeped from the stones, its labored gait syncing with her own faltering steps. Blood from its wounds had seeped through the bandages, staining her sleeve in dark, sticky blooms. But the beast moved with a stubborn grace, golden eyes scanning the gloom ahead like a lantern-cutting fog. Ilara's mind swirled with the visions that had gripped her earlier, fragments of a life not her own, the Alpha's throne, forged from the bones of fallen foes, where he had sat as both man and monster, his decrees rippling through the realms like thunder over fractured skies. The curse's origin haunted her thoughts, a betrayal by a long-dead queen, her jealousy twisting the moon's gift into chains that bound the royal bloodline to endless cycles of fur and fang. And now she, a nameless girl from the Hollow's ashes, was woven into that tapestry, her mercy the thread that could unravel or reinforce it. Her hand trembled against the wolf's side, feeling the rapid flutter of its heart, a mirror to her own, a drumbeat of fear laced with an inexplicable pull, like roots entwining beneath the soil, seeking light in darkness. They emerged from the ravine into a hidden glade, where moonlight filtered through a canopy of ancient willows, their branches drooping like weary mourners, silver leaves whispering elegies to the wind. The ground here was carpeted in soft moss, cool and yielding underfoot, releasing a scent of crushed herbs and wild mint that eased the burn in Ilara's lungs. She collapsed against a gnarled trunk, its bark rough as scarred flesh against her back, and the wolf sank beside her, its massive head resting on her lap with a sigh that rumbled through her bones. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, her body a map of aches, thighs burning from the climb, fingers numb from gripping the branch crutch. But in this fragile sanctuary, solitude cracked open, revealing the raw ache of connection. "Rest," she murmured, her voice hoarse, threading her fingers through the wolf's fur, coarse yet soothing, like stroking the edge of a storm cloud. The beast's eye met hers, holding a depth that pierced the veil between worlds. In its gaze, Ilara saw not just survival, but echoes of her losses. Thomas's final glance before the flames claimed him, the village elders' bowed heads under the tithe collectors' whips. The Alpha's isolation mirrored her own, a king cursed to prowl alone, his heart armored in beastly rage to shield the tenderness beneath. A low whine escaped the wolf, vibrating against her thigh, and warmth bloomed in her palm, spreading up her arm like liquid fire. Visions surged again, unbidden. The Alpha in human form, his skin etched with lunar scars that glowed under the eclipse, standing at the edge of a battlefield where rivers ran red. He reached for a figure in the mist, her or someone like her, his touch a promise of redemption, but the moon pulled him back, fur erupting in a howl that shattered the stars. She gasped, the connection snapping like a taut bowstring, leaving her breathless and trembling. The wolf nuzzled closer, its tongue rasping gently over her knuckles, tasting the salt of her sweat and the faint tremor of unshed tears. In that touch, power stirred within her, a subtle hum, like the earth's quiet awakening after frost. Her veins tingled, as if dormant vines unfurled, granting her glimpses of the wood's secrets, hidden paths glowing faintly, wards etched in dew that could repel the hunter's steel. It was the claim's first gift, a whisper of the Alpha's wild essence bleeding into her soul, binding them in a dance of sacrifice and rebirth. But with it came the weight of destiny, heavy as chains, the knowledge that saving him meant inviting the crown's fury upon her fragile world. The peace shattered with a distant crash, branches splintering like brittle bones. The hunters had found the ravine's mouth, their torches flickering like malevolent eyes in the night. "They're coming," Ilara whispered, urgency sharpening her voice as she hauled herself up, the wolf rising with a muffled growl that echoed off the willows. Its wounds wept fresh crimson, but the beast's stance steadied, muscles rippling with renewed ferocity. She led them onward, through a veil of hanging vines that parted like reluctant curtains, their leaves brushing her skin with a cool, silken kiss. The glade gave way to a denser thicket, thorns snagging at her skirts like grasping fingers, drawing beads of blood that mingled with the wolf's own, a symbolic baptism in shared peril. Deeper in, the air grew heavier, saturated with the musk of nocturnal blooms and the faint rot of forgotten hollows. Ilara's heart pounded, each beat a clash of terror and resolve. She had fed a dying wolf, and now it, or he, fed her strength, turning her solitude into a fierce alliance. The bond deepened with every step, impossible love flickering like bioluminescent fungi in the dark, tender yet doomed, a flame that could warm or consume. Flashes of the Alpha's past assaulted her, lovers lost to the curse's rage, kingdoms crumbled under his beastly wrath, the endless hunt for one pure enough to break the cycle. Was she that one? The question hung, unanswered, as the hound's baying swelled, closer now, a tide of fangs and fury crashing toward them. They burst into a clearing ringed by standing stones, ancient monoliths carved with swirling runes that pulsed faintly under the moon's gaze. The wolf halted, hackles rising, and Ilara felt the power here, a nexus of old magic, where ley lines converged like veins of starlight. The air hummed, charged with ozone and the scent of impending storm. The hunters' voices rang clear now, boots thundering through the underbrush, but the stones seemed to lean in, protective shadows lengthening. Ilara pressed against the wolf, her hand buried in its fur, and whispered a vow born of the night's forge. "Whatever you are, I'll stand with you." The beast's rumble answered, a vow in kind, as the first torchlight pierced the tree line. In that suspended moment, amid thorns and moonlight, Ilara shed the skin of the forgotten girl. Sacrifice loomed, a shadow promising loss, but also the dawn of power, her own, intertwined with the Alpha's wild heart. The hunt closed in, destiny's jaws snapping, but she met it not with flight, but with the quiet fire of rebirth, ready to claim her place in the shadowed throne. Torchlight erupted through the thicket like veins of fire, casting jagged shadows that danced across the standing stones like spectres fleeing judgment. The air in the ancient circle thickened, humming with an electric charge that raised the fine hairs on Ilara's arms, the scent of scorched pine and oiled leather mingling with the earthy tang of the mossy ground. The wolf's body tensed against hers, its fur a bristling barrier of silver and shadow, muscles quivering with the effort to shield her from the encroaching blaze. Her heart thundered, a wild cadence syncing with the beast's ragged breaths, each inhale drawing in the night's raw essence. Ozone from the charged runes, the metallic bite of fear sweat, and the faint floral rot of blooms crushed under pursuing boots. Ilara's fingers dug deeper into the wolf's pelt, the coarse strands grounding her as panic clawed at her throat. The stones loomed around them, monolithic guardians etched with spirals that seemed to writhe under the moon's merciless gaze, pulsing with a faint inner light like veins of captured starfire. Legends whispered of this place, a crossroads of the old blood, where the veil between man and beast thinned to gossamer, and oaths forged in moonlight could shatter curses or summon tempests. She had never believed them, dismissing such tales as the elders' way to romanticize despair, but now the air itself vibrated with truth, pressing against her skin like a lover's urgent whisper. The hunters burst into the clearing, a pack of 6 shadowed figures, their faces gaunt masks, illuminated by the flickering torches. Armor clinked with predatory grace, leather creaking over broad frames, honed by years of relentless pursuit. At their fore strode Captain Thorn, his scar-riven cheek twitching under a beard matted with trail dust, eyes narrowed to slits of cold steel. Hounds flanked him, sleek brutes with eyes like embers, their chains rattling as they strained forward, nostrils flaring to drink in the wolf's blood scent. "There!" Thorn barked, his voice a gravelly thunder that split the night. "The king's prize, and some wench playing nursemaid. Seize them both!" Elara staggered back, her makeshift crutch splintering against a stone as the wolf lunged forward, a guttural snarl ripping from its throat. The sound was primal, echoing off the monoliths like a war cry from forgotten ages, sending a shiver through the hounds that made them yelp and recoil. But the men advanced, swords drawn with a hiss of steel on scabbards, the blades catching moonlight in lethal gleams. Fear coiled in Elara's gut, sharp as thorns, but beneath it burned the bond's fire, a warmth spreading from her palm where it touched the wolf, unfurling like dawn through frost-kissed vines. Visions assaulted her again, the Alpha's coronation under a blood moon, his human form regal yet haunted, crown of antler and thorn pressing into his brow as he vowed to protect the fractured realms. Betrayal followed. A queen's poisoned kiss, twisting his gift into torment, binding him to the beast within, dooming his line to solitude unless claimed by one whose heart mirrored the wild's unyielding mercy. "Stay back!" Elara's voice cracked like dry earth, surprising even herself with its steel. She stepped forward, positioning her body beside the wolf's, the branch raised like a frail scepter. The hunters laughed, a harsh chorus that grated against the stone's hum, but Thorn's gaze sharpened, flicking between her and the beast with dawning recognition. "Fool girl," he sneered, circling with the grace of a viper. "That thing's the Alpha's bane, or his throne. Touch it, and you're forfeit to the crown." His sword arced toward the wolf, but the beast moved like liquid shadow, jaws snapping inches from the man's arm, forcing him to leap back with a curse. Chaos erupted. The hounds broke free, chains snapping like brittle bones, lunging with foam-flecked maws. Elara swung her crutch, connecting with the beast's flank in a dull thud that sent it yelping into the underbrush. Pain flared in her arm, hot and insistent, but the bond surged, lending her strength, a supernatural grace that made her dodge a hunter's grasp, her feet light as if the earth itself propelled her. The wolf whirled, massive paws churning the moss into fragrant mulch, its fangs sinking into a hound's shoulder with a wet crunch. Blood sprayed, warm and coppery, splattering Elara's cheek like ritual paint, and she tasted its salt on her lips, mingling with her own rising bile. Thorn pressed the attack, his blade whistling toward the wolf's wounded side, aiming to reopen the arrow's cruel legacy. Elara cried out, lunging between them, the flat of the sword glancing off her shoulder in a blaze of agony that buckled her knees. She hit the ground hard, stones biting into her palms, drawing fresh blood that seeped into the runes below. The wolf roared, a sound that shook the circle, the monoliths flaring brighter, their light weaving threads of silver around them like protective webs. In that blaze, the beast blurred, fur receding in waves, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. Broad shoulders scarred by lunar wars, dark hair tousled, and eyes, those golden eyes, locked on her with a ferocity laced with raw, unspoken plea. The transformation halted, incomplete. The curse's chains holding fast under the moon's incomplete pull, but the power rippled outward. Vines erupted from the earth, ancient roots summoned by the bond's call, snaring the hunter's legs in thorny embraces that drew screams and curses. Thorn slashed free, his face twisted in fury, but the wolf, no, the Alpha in partial form, leapt, tackling him to the moss with a thunderous impact. Things grazed the captain's throat, not piercing but promising as the man went still, breath ragged with defeat. Elara rose, shoulder throbbing like a forge's heart, blood trickling warm down her arm to pool with the rune's glow. The remaining hunters faltered, torches guttering in the magical wind that whipped through the circle, carrying the scent of ozone and wild rebirth. One fled into the dark, abandoning his post, while others knelt, weapons clattering in surrender. The wolf released Thorn, who scrambled back, eyes wide with the terror of glimpsed truth. "Mercy," he rasped, But Ilara met his gaze, her voice steady amid the pain. "The mercy you denied others. Go, tell your king the claim is answered, not by force, but by blood, freely given." The hunters retreated, dragging their wounded into the night, the hounds' whimpers fading like echoes of shattered fealty. Silence descended, broken only by the wolf's heavy pants and Ilara's labored breaths. She sank beside him, hand pressing to his flank where the wounds wept anew, the bond pulsing like a shared heartbeat, tender, fierce, a bridge between solitude and destiny. In the stone's fading light, she saw the man clearer now, his form stabilizing, the curse yielding to the night's forge. Loss weighed on her, the village's safety shattered, her old life a ghost. But in its place bloomed hope, fragile as first light, promising a throne shared in shadow and moon. As the moon dipped toward dawn's edge, Ilara whispered into the wolf's ear, "We endure together." The beast's rumble answered, a vow sealed in blood and starlight, the first step toward breaking chains long forged in betrayal. The wild heart had claimed her, and in claiming, set her free. The standing stones stood sentinel in the clearing's hush, their runes dimming to embers as the moon surrendered to the horizon's blush. Ilara knelt beside the wolf, her bloodied hand pressed to its heaving flank, the warmth of its fur seeping through her fingers like a lifeline woven from starlit threads. The air hung heavy with the aftermath, charred earth from guttered torches, the metallic tang of spilled blood mingling with the wild mint crushed under fallen bodies, and the faint, acrid smoke of fear's retreat. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, insistent fire, each pulse a reminder of the blade's kiss, but the pain felt distant, eclipsed by the bond's insistent hum vibrating through her veins, a symphony of shared breath and unspoken oaths. The wolf's golden eye held hers, no longer just beastly ferocity, but a mirror to the man's soul beneath, haunted, regal, etched with the weight of centuries. Its body trembled, muscles rippling in waves that blurred the line between fur and flesh, the curse's chains straining against the night's unraveling magic. Ilara's breath caught, her free hand tracing the jagged scars beneath the pelt, feeling the fevered heat of transformation stirring like a storm, awakening in dormant skies. "Show me," she whispered, her voice raw from cries and commands, laced with the tenderness of impossible love. "Let me see the king you hide." A low rumble built in the wolf's chest, not a growl, but a resonant song that echoed off the stones, drawing the first tentative light of dawn into the circle. The air shimmered, charged with ozone and the scent of blooming nightshade, petals unfurling in the underbrush as if the earth itself bore witness. Fur receded in silken waves, revealing skin bronzed by lunar wars, broad shoulders corded with scars that glowed faintly silver, like rivers of moonlight etched into flesh. The beast's form elongated, paws shifting to hands that clenched the mossy ground, claws retracting with a soft, pained sigh. Pain twisted his features, high cheekbones sharpening, jaw clenching as midnight hair fell across a brow furrowed in agony, yet his eyes remained burning gold, locking onto her with a gratitude that cracked the solitude of his endless nights. He rose unsteadily, the Alpha King in full, naked save for the bandages she had bound, his body a testament to battles won and curses endured. Towering yet vulnerable, he extended a hand, calloused palm upturned, mirroring her earlier gesture of peace. Ilara hesitated, the world's fractures flashing in her mind, the village's fragile hearths now doomed to the king's reprisal, Thomas's ghost whispering warnings from the flames, her own life a thread snapped by this wild tether. But in his gaze she saw not conquest but recognition, a queen in the making forged from mercy's quiet forge. She placed her hand in his, skin to skin, and the bond ignited fully, a rush of power flooding her like dawn's first warmth-piercing frost. Visions cascaded, no longer fragments but a torrent, his coronation under a canopy of thorns, where he had pledged to heal the fractured realms, only for the curse to twist his heart into isolation's cage. Lovers lost to the beast's rage. Kingdoms crumbled under moon-mad decrees, the endless hunt for one whose soul could temper the wild without taming it. And now, her, Ilara, the forgotten daughter of Ashes, standing at the nexus, her touch the key to shattering the lunar yoke. Power bloomed within her, vines of strength coiling through her limbs, mending the gash on her shoulder with a tingling heat that left only a faint, silvery scar, a mark of their shared rebirth. Yet sacrifice demanded its toll. As the sun crested, painting the stones in golden fire, Ilara felt the pull, a severing from her old world. Visions of Eldridge Hollow flickered, Mira's sharp eyes turning to accusation, the communal hall emptying under Enforcer's boots, the fields she had tended reduced to warning pyres. Tears traced her cheeks, salt mingling with the dew on his skin as he drew her close, his arms encircling her with a gentleness that belied his king's ferocity. "You fed death with hope," he murmured, his voice a deep timbre, like thunder rolling over distant hills, roughened by disuse yet laced with wonder. "And in dawn's light I claim you, not as prize but as equal. Will you walk the shadowed throne with me?" His breath ghosted her temple, carrying the musk of pine and blood, and she leaned into him, the chill of loss thawing in his warmth. The impossible love that had taken root in the clearing now flourished, tender petals amid thorns of destiny, a union born of solitude's end, where sacrifice birthed hope. "I will," she replied, her voice steady, the words of vow etched in the rising light. The scar on her shoulder pulsed, a cicatrix of transformation, binding her not to chains, but to freedom's wild heart. The woods stirred around them, ancient pines bowing as if in reverence, the wind carrying whispers of a new era, rebellion's spark kindled, realms mending under a rule tempered by mercy. Ilara met his gaze, seeing not just the Alpha's crown of antler and thorn, but the man who had whimpered under her care, vulnerable and alive. Dawn fully broke, bathing them in light that chased shadows from the glade, a symbolic renascimento where death's door yielded to life's fierce bloom. In that moment, entwined amid the standing stones, Ilara shed her orphan skin. The Alpha's claim was complete, a destiny forged in blood, moonlight, and the quiet act of feeding a dying wolf. Solitude faded into shared horizon, violence yielding to tenderness, and as the sun climbed, hope rose with it, fragile, unyielding, eternal.